hiring manager isn't going to care. They just want to fill their job.
Do TA know what their value is?
No. No. I can expand upon that. If all you're doing is aggregation of CVs or all you're doing is processing those, the systems can do it more effectively.
Our cost per hire has gone up by £300. Sorry, our metrics gone the wrong direction, but we've saved the business £2 million. Hey Toby, welcome. Great to have you on the podcast, buddy.
Thank you very much for having me. Good to be here.
I know we're going to have a contentious one today, and we're going to definitely have some challenging thoughts with you on there. An hour is never going to be enough for recording, and whatever this gets chopped down to by our editors is not going to be enough, because we can have a chat about one topic, you and I, and end up going for hours anyway. But yeah, absolute pleasure to have you on today. And I know one of the things you're speaking a lot about at the moment is TA's value and where TA exists within the ecosystem and how it kind of responds into businesses, which, given the last kind of 6 to 8 months, is absolutely crucial with what's been happening in recruitment. So why don't we start, like, open question, like, do TA know what their value is?
No. No. I can expand upon that.
Yeah.
If we like, no, we don't at all. No, I think for too long, particularly TA internally. So when I say TA, I mean internal recruitment. When we all came in house and we brought this stuff in house 20, 30 years ago, the main focus was cost reduction versus agency spend. That's kind of why were all brought in house. And yes, you could say it was to do it faster, but it was the efficiency play. Similar with sourcing, we brought sourcing in house to cut out that agency spend. The problem with that is you can only keep cutting out and keep that process efficiency going so far. And I think we're seeing the output of that now, where we've built this whole machine to run really efficiently, really effectively, in a really cost-effective manner. If you look at the average cost per hire internally, it's a fraction of agency spend. So we're running a really efficient, effective machine. But the problem is you can't go any further. You can only cut so far back. For me, the value of TA has never been around that efficiency and effectiveness play. If you look at kind of what TA should be, it's everything around right people, right place, right time, etc. And it ties much more into that strategic workforce planning. And it's getting back to the roots of, we were recruitment consultants. And the important word there isn't, for me, it's not the recruitment piece, it's the consultant piece. And the biggest pain point I think we're missing at the moment is that our value is that consulting. Our value is the advisory. And I think we've lost sight of that. We've had such a focus on the efficiency play and the recruitment play that we've lost sight of the advisory and the consulting play.
And I think we'll obviously get into the data parts later. It would be obtuse of us to ignore that, given where you operate. But like, thinking about it, it's much more tangible, right? It's much easier to show this metric's move from A to B when we're thinking about the transactional delivery kind of elements of it. When you speak about the consultancy, where do you see like that value? What's being lost, and how can TA play that value more cleanly back into organizations?
Yeah, so even if you just think, not even hard data, so not even the quant style stuff, but even if you thought about the qual and the qualitative stuff we hear every day, if you think about a team that's hiring for somebody in their organization, usually traditional metrics would be kind of 100 to 1. So 100 applications down to 10 interviews through to one placement. Generally speaking, we're talking to the business about the 5 candidates we've down selected and moving it through the process into the hire. That's 100 candidates worth of information, 100 applicants that we haven't forwarded through. We haven't had that flow of information through. How many of them have turned us down due to compensation? How many of them have turned us down due to location? How many have turned us down due to the skills that they were looking for, or the way that the org design has been set up, or our employer brand? All of this is really rich information that the business needs to know and want to know. We're just not very good at bubbling that up and surfacing it because we're so focused on just getting the interviews done and getting the process efficient and getting the hire made. So we're not very good at bubbling that up. And I think historically we've been very good as an industry of being the duck. When you see the duck floating across the pond and it's nice and calm and serene and it looks in control, and what you don't see is its legs feverishly plowing away under the water. We're kind of like that, where we want to be seen as this in control, calm, serene piece, which is great. but we're not really good at opening kind of under the hood for the business to let them know all the energy, all the activity that's happening below the surface that's leading to that. And that will, that ratio of 100 to one hire, that's for one hire. If your organization's making 1,000 hires a year, that's 100,000 data points you're not pushing back to the business, and that multiplies up. If you're making 4,000, 5,000, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of data points, hundreds of thousands of engagements with the market, with your competitors, with the skills that you need, etc. That isn't flowing back. The commercial value of that amount of intelligence is ridiculous. It's a huge amount. If your business are going out to get like direct primary research done on 100,000 individuals a year, it would cost them an astronomical amount. And yet we have all of this primary research that we're pulling back. And even if there's some systems, processes, tool stuff, we're not very good at collating it, we're not very good at aggregating it, we're not very good at analysing it. But even if without that, even if we're not even getting into that the kind of heavier element and really digging into it, even just the anecdotal bubbling up, we're just not doing that well enough. And I think with that comes trust, with that comes advisory, and suddenly you can get into the heavier conversations of org design or location strategy or competency based, or we mentioned before we kicked off about skills based hiring. You can start challenging these conversations a bit more because you feel like a more robust 360 consultant rather than a single faceted, you're here to fill a job. That's it. And that's your beginning and end of your remit.
And I think the piece on that kind of collecting, aggregating, and then analysing the data, it's also then being able to replay it back eloquently and do so within a time frame, right? I think the other challenge with this is it is transactional. People do want people placed, and they want the information on the 10 candidates they're about to interview. How can you make it so that the qualitative information of all of the rest is surfaced in the right way? And who's that point of contact as well? Because does the hiring manager care? That could be one question, but should the business care? And I think that point on competitor insights is fascinating, right? That's a multi-million-pound project for some organizations to get that kind of sentiment mapping. So I don't know, have you seen good examples of people playing that part back well? Like the kind of competitor benchmarking understanding?
Yeah. Well, obviously I'm biased given what I do in the talent intelligence side of things, because that's one of the main products I'd say a lot of the TI teams that sit within TA look to do. Largely speaking, it's more on the OSINT side of things, so the open source intelligence, reverse engineering job descriptions or reverse engineering social posts or whatever. The interview side of things and capturing that conversation, it's really hard. It's really hard because you can't, it's very hard to do it in any way without a system behind the scenes. You need some mechanism to capture this. You need a mechanism that's going to capture it as part of the standard workflow as well. Recruiters have absolute platform fatigue. They've got platform overload, so they're getting dragged in all these different directions. If you give them yet one more tool, now go and fill this form in, or go and add this, whatever. It's just one more thing, and they're not going to do it. So you either need it as part of a standard workflow, and you're extracting it as a byproduct, which is the ideal, or you need to have really robust KPIs around it. KPIs drive behaviors. So if you really want this to be driven and you don't have it as byproduct, you need to have very, very strict key performance indicators to say, this is what I expect from you. This is what's needed. There is a broader piece around changing the whole culture of TA and having us as more of an intelligence-led organization. I've seen plenty of examples of that as well, where, for example, if a recruiter needed to go to an agency, as standard, it would be fine, great, let's review where you're at 60 days, 90 days, whatever this intervention point is. Show me all the intelligence you've provided to get you to this point. Yeah. And so it's that challenging back to the recruiter saying, you can't just pick up a rec, throw out the advert, wait for an ad response and come back and say, oh, we can't fill it, we need to go to agency. It's, well, on the briefing, what did you take to the hiring manager? How did you consult them? How did you advise them on this skill set or this location or whatever it may be? And so it's challenging, but a little bit harder at the front end to say, this is part of your job. It might not be a comfortable part of your job. It might be an area we have to upskill recruiters. We have to get them more comfortable talking with these data points and how to influence using data. But it should be part and parcel of the job for me.
Yeah, and so that's where I suppose you see a lot of the value that's being lost. Where do you see, like, if you were to take an eagle-eye view and look down on recruiters, where do you see them attributing value themselves? Like, how do you think people are judging themselves right now within orgs?
I think across the industry, we're probably feeling a little lost and nervous because we're seeing things like Gen AI coming through. We're seeing a lot of kind of the vendor landscape saying we can fully automate and go hire manager self-service, etc. I think we're probably feeling a little bit nervous around, okay, what's our place in this new system? How does this play out? If we are, and I've said before, the reality is, if you're a process administrator, the systems can do processes better than you. If all you're doing is aggregation of CVs, or all you're doing is processing those, the systems can do it more effectively. So we've got to be really clear about what that value is in the process and what we want to be. I think we probably will see a divide. I think we'll see a divide in the industry where there will be teams that it's purely process administration and it's purely process efficiency, and you'll be running very lean teams, probably with a fairly decent tech stack, a high degree of hiring manager self-service, a high degree of candidate self-service, and you'll run a very lean team, and you'll run very efficiently. It's just as valuable to a business. You're just hitting the bottom line rather than trying to improve the top line. And then I think you'll have other teams that will run a very different model. You'll have things like that in place for maybe the 80% of volume and the business's usual transactional activity. And then the other 20% that's a bit higher touch, higher value, needs that little bit more work. You'll double down on that. And you'll see teams that will really go into the consulting side of things, advising the M&A teams. If you're about to go and take over a company and land and expand, is that even feasible?
Yeah.
Are we about to buy a company and want to ship it from 500 people to 5,000, but they're the only 500 people with that skill set in the entire world? That's never going to happen. There aren't any other teams looking at that external lens. There aren't teams within companies that are looking at whether it's location strategy or D&I intelligence or talent sentiment. There aren't any other teams with this much focus on the external market that can bring it in. And I think we need to get outside of our lane a little bit and get comfortable in those empty spaces. I often talk about TI being like expanding foam. If you spray expanding foam into a wall, it's not going to stay where you put it. It's going to take up the space and take up that void. And I think at the moment there's a lot of space and a lot of void within corporates around this sort of talent consulting, talent advisory, talent intelligence, that we need to take up that space, because if not, somebody else will, and then what we'll be left with.
Yeah, and there's already plenty of brands doing that, right? Taking up that space, and organizations find themselves invariably going to consultancy practices, many of them fantastic, within RPOs or within external, organizations to the industry that aren't just consulting on this, they're consulting on everything, right? And they end up providing that advice, and maybe they don't have the same context as the team internally. Doesn't mean that it needs to be one or the other, but how can you partner with those externals? Or, like you say, how can you fill that void from that kind of understanding of actually what's going on within the organization? So I think it's fascinating on that front. I think the problem that you've highlighted, though, on applications is one of the biggest problems that's facing all teams operationally at the moment is sheer volumes, because it's so easy to apply. All the big players have made it very easy to apply. Gen AI has made it even easier for candidates to apply. And now people are losing that human value, which, like you've kind of rightly pointed to, is the key part. What about like broad brush TA metrics? Like, where do you see them standing now, in the future? What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I do agree about the volume of application. I think we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner where we were so desperate for candidates to apply, and we removed so many barriers to entry for candidate application, and then made it so easy to apply, even though if you look at the candidates, they'll frequently still complain about the multiple instances of Workday or whatever they're going to have to create their profile in, etc. But with the new tooling coming from Gen AI and the ability to apply to multiple places at the same time, that's definitely increasing. And it's a bit of a vicious storm, particularly with the market flatter, less opportunities out there. People are applying a lot more aggressively. So I think that we definitely need to up our game in terms of how are we using tech to help us with this, whether it's an open talent assessment piece, whether it's using the applications and CVs to do more interesting things. So I mentioned kind of talking to candidates and getting the intelligence from that way. But there's obviously a huge amount of information within CVs and within application profiles that you can start looking at from a data perspective to really inform the stuff and help. So I think there's a lot we can do within that.
That's a nice glass half full view before we move to the other question of like too many applications and using it as a data source. I think many people listening will be thinking, well, wait a minute. No, I'm sitting here and I've got 1,000 applications for a role and I've got to sift through them. I've got an internal
It's a
SLA that
lovely
tells me
data
I've got
point.
to go back to every candidate within, 24, 48 hours, etc. Because of our candidate experience process. So I don't know. I think I like it. I like it. You're normally much more challenging than that. So nice. And then I think we were about to segue, but we got a little bit lost, which invariably we will do. But we're about to segue and have a conversation around TA metrics and what you see the place for traditional TA metrics. And then I'll maybe challenge you if you think there's any more that we should be focusing on as a follow up. Get your grey matter working in the background. But TA metrics, where do you see their place?
Yeah, I think TA metrics is a really hard one because to an extent, we've painted ourselves into a corner where, because of the last 30 years we mentioned around us coming in as an efficiency play and a cost play, so much of our metrics are based around that. So whether it's cost per hire, time to hire, it's all around that time, quality, cost piece. We often try and pivot to the quality. I'm not convinced on that. I'm not convinced that the business, after a certain period of time of onboarding, they see us as any value within that process, because there's obviously so much out of our control in terms of the individual success within an organization. And it almost feels like me, IT procurement, taking credit for the software written in the organization because they provided the laptops. And it just doesn't feel like that's a valid metric for me. I don't think cost per hire, time to hire, I don't think they're going away. I think we need to get smarter around how we're looking at that and what that really means. I think we need to. What I'd love to see is people getting more aware of the commercial impact. So, if you are going for sales individuals, fine. That empty seat time is a cost. How are we giving money back to the business by improving that? So I think there's a lot of, and you have various roles like that. So if you're a consulting firm, it's going to be your day rate cost. All right, well, how are we actually giving money back to the business through our efficiency? So I think there's things like that we can get to. I think there's bits around, if we are going to double down on the efficiency play, let's really get into that. All right, well, if we're putting one candidate in front of you and you've made one hire, that's far more efficient from a time perspective as you as a hiring manager and an interview team than if we're having to go through 10 candidates to get to that one hire. So what's the improved effectiveness and efficiency ratios there, and the money given back to the business or time given back to the business or the hiring managers because of that? But ultimately, if we're focusing on kind of a traditional role of TA being this limited, we're here to find people in that process, then you're going to have a limited number of KPIs you can play with. There are certain KPIs the business just won't focus on. There are certain ones they will. I've seen empty seat time being absolutely amazing and landing really well for sales teams and for consulting orgs. I've equally had finance people turn around to me and say, what do you mean? I really like empty seat time. It means I'm not paying for somebody to be in that job. As long as it's not affecting.
And guess what?
Attrition.
We still delivered the project.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So as long as it's not affecting productivity and output for the business, they're quite happy for that added kind of burden to be on the other members of the team. They're quite happy for that. But I think there are probably other things we should be diving into deeper. So owning things like talent sentiment and candidate sentiment, really capturing all that intel side of things and seeing how we can plug into other areas of the business in a different way. I think that will drive different behaviors and different outcomes and different KPIs accordingly. But I think it's all new ground. I think it's going to take time, and I think it will be a hard change cycle to break, because we've essentially had 20 or 30 years building these KPIs and having a whole industry of HR leads and business leads understanding that's how you measure TA. And so for us to pivot that and change, it's going to take time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you've touched on some really great themes there. And I'll talk to anybody who listens about the commercial impact of TA at the moment. I think it's the most crucial thing. But you take a traditional metric, you take a cost per hire, and actually it is reframing that discussion. It is going to be a long change cycle. But hey, we've spent more time, we've got more resource, and we've got more channels. And the aim of this is to bring the quality of hire to the same level and reduce the overall headcount cost for the organisation. So our cost per hire has gone up by £300. Sorry, our metric's gone the wrong direction, but we've saved the business £2 million in compounded savings over the next few years.
100%.
Like, being able to replay that back is crucial, but like you say, this is like a learned metric. This is something where the business says, hey, we're going to put in a TA function. They're going to save us money here. They're going to be efficient, save us costs. And this is the journey that we're going on. And this is the output that we're going to reach. Well, all of a sudden that dynamic changes, and being able to evidence that is there. And actually, easy segue, we have to talk about talent intelligence. We just have to, given your background, experience, and reputation. You literally wrote the book on it. Let's talk about some of those kind of scenarios, I suppose. Like, what's a nice way of playing back? Maybe it's not commercial impact, but just that data of changing perception within an organization and getting them used to consuming things in a different way.
I will answer that question, but just that you sprung to my mind in that last piece, just around the journey. And I don't think we should be scared of that. It's the same journey many other functions have gone through. If you think about procurement and their strategic impact, and you have your CPOs on the board, etc., they weren't always procurement. They were buyers, and very transactional delivery stuff for many, many, many years. And they went through a whole transformation program to become more strategic advisory and looking at the holistic lifestyle cycle of their product ranges and categories. I think we're in the same journey. We're going from that, we're a transactional buyer of human capital services, to actually, if we're looking at this more holistically, we need to be the kind of the procurement of HR. But yeah, it's TI.
Yeah. So maybe we don't answer that other question, because I think that's a wonderful framing as well, like of it, and thinking about a related part of the organization. It's an excellent way of thinking about it. And I'd say, again, similar to that journey, how can we continue to challenge and think about things in different ways, think about our impact in different ways? And I think some of it's going to be foundational stuff, which is pretty easy to interrogate. There's going to be other elements of it that, frankly, like you say, can we lay credit to the overall performance of an organization because of the people that we placed? Like, come on, every team's part of that journey. I love that employer brand story. Maybe it's the guy that was cleaning the floor at NASA and said, I put people on the moon, that well-told story in our space. We are all contributing towards it, but yeah, it's hard to attribute. But let's jump to talent intelligence, because we literally have to, and I'm conscious of time. So thinking about, again, replaying back that story, how can people get started? How can people think about, how do I take this information which I know, this hypothesis that I've got, and then prove and deliver?
Yeah, I think for me, it's finding the right mechanism, the right channel, and the right medium, basically. You mentioned earlier that hiring manager isn't going to care. They just want to fill their job. 100%. It's too late by that point. They're just trying to fill a job. But if you're seeing red flags, if you're seeing certain locations that you've got a higher cost per hire or a higher time to hire, or it's a continual issue, dig into it. Why is that? What's going on? And how do you then go proactively to the business and say, look, this is the situation we're facing. This isn't going to get any better. This is what we advise. And I think that's the important bit. We're quite often, we've got lots of tooling nowadays to pull data and to, like, LinkedIn Talent Insights, or even if you're not buying like specific TI products, there's still plenty of information within our CRMs, our ATSs, LinkedIn Recruiter, whatever you're using. And what we're very good generally at doing is pulling a load of information. We get a bit nervous about what it actually is telling us. So we think, we'll just give all the information to the hiring manager or the business, and it'll be obvious to them what the problem is. And we kind of just deluge them with information. And they sit there going, I don't know what your problem is. What are you trying to tell me here? What are you trying to advise? And I think that's the piece. It's taking that information and saying, this is the problem. This is what we need to sort out. And this is what we advise to fix this problem. But pick the ones that are comfortable. Like it can be a big jump and a leap of faith to suddenly go from a transactional TA process to suddenly trying to influence your business strategy or your M&A strategy, or that's a really big jump. But going in and saying, actually, do you know what, we've had this site where we've been trying to get software engineers in for the last 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. We consistently have a high time to hire. We're consistently going beyond comp ranges. We can actually see that the candidate rate isn't getting any better. No matter what we do in terms of branding and marketing, we're not getting anywhere. We're digging ourselves into a hole here. We've done some research and seen that, in actual fact, we can see most of our people are going to this competitor X, Y, or Z. They're ramping up their operations. They're hiring a more aggressive rate. Either we carry on here and we know it's going to be a problem, we know it's going to be something to face, or if we go to this other site that we've located 50 miles down the road, or other location that we have another team in already, there's a big untapped talent pool for us there for software engineering. It can affect X, Y, and Z. It's going to give us a better cost per hire. It's going to give you better stability. It's a lower attrition rate, etc. Do you think that would be a good idea? And it's just broadening those conversations.
Yeah.
Also, quite often TA leaders will be going into organizations and their business leaders saying, what are you trying to achieve next year? And the answer they get back will be their hiring demand. Say, look, this is what we're trying to achieve next year. I think it's that pivot from that's great, but what are you actually trying to achieve next year? What's your business goals? What is your strategy? What's your 2-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan? What are you trying to actually achieve? And what's going to stop you from getting there? And without doubt, the biggest asset for any of the C-suite, they'll say, is their people. People are our biggest asset. What's going to stop us from hitting any of our goals is access to the right people and skills. Fine. So we now have it on, nailed down. The most important thing for you as a business leader to achieve your goals over the next 3-5 years is having access to the right talent, people, and skills. Great. We can take you on that journey. We can help you with that journey, but you have to work with us. If we're saying these aren't the right locations, these aren't the right skills, we have to push things. We've got a high attrition issue. It really changes the framing of that conversation. But they're hungry for this data. Like I'm yet to meet a business leader that if you say I can give you a better idea of the context, what's going on externally, would you like that? I'm yet to meet a business leader that wouldn't want that. If you can say we can give you a better handle on what's going on in your competition, what's going on in your markets, what's going on in your business lanes, they want this information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we're thinking about it's almost like scenarios, right? It's having a set of scenarios where you can say, look, you've got a problem here, and not to go too much into skills-based hiring. I think we could do a whole another section on it, but you've got a problem that you need to be able to solve with skills and with people. And here's the 5 different ways that you can do it. Or here's my suggested recommendation, and these are all the reasons. I think, replaying that back, I find it very hard for any business leader to not want to listen. And again, it's just how you capture that information, how you make it practical. So thinking about that part, like if somebody's just starting out and they're thinking about this journey, like where could they go? Where can they get this information?
So you mentioned scenario there. You could go like hardcore into like wargaming and scenario planning and get your HRBP in there and your comp person in there and your business leader in there and say, all right, well, we're planning this out 5 years. We're going to pretend we're our competition first, and then we're going to pretend we're us. How do we compare and contrast and fight against each other in these scenarios? That's quite a big leap to go from filling jobs to that. It's quite a big skill set leap, and it's quite a big mental leap. I'd say start really simple. Look at the data you've already got that you're just not using. So look at your CRM, look at your ATS, look at the candidate flow, look where the red flags are. If you don't have access to the data, make friends. Go and make friends with the people in people analytics. Go and make friends with the people in strategic workforce planning. I'd say dial up on curiosity and really just go out and talk to people. Within TA, naturally, we attract people that want to go and talk to individuals. A big part of the job is interviewing, it's talking, it's networking. Dial that up internally, because there's going to be people that you meet and you talk to and go, that's a really interesting skill set. We can definitely need that in the future to help build out any kind of TI capability. Or actually, that's a really interesting problem you're facing in marketing. Would it be interesting to know how those competitors that you're looking at, what they're hiring, what skills they're hiring, what locations they're hiring, what senior leaders have they just brought on board? Yeah, that would be really interesting to know. Great, how do we partner to bring this stuff in? So I'd say start small. You don't need to go out and buy a whole TI suite immediately. Start with your own internal data. Get comfortable playing with it. Be prepared to do some loss leader projects. When you go shopping and they have your Costco hot dog for $1 and they're like, we're never increasing the prices. They know it's a loss leader. They lose money on every single one, but it gets the customer in. Think about those projects. What's going on in your business that you go, this is a big topic item that no one's really talking about, but they probably need a handle on it from an external perspective. So it could be cost of living crisis. It could be the return to office, remote work, whatever it may be. Put pen to paper, write down. So it doesn't have to be an extensive paper on this stuff. It can just be a little one-page document or a few slides just to say, this is some interesting stuff. Could this be worth digging into a bit deeper? And then just put it out there. Start doing a newsletter. Newsletters are hugely undervalued. I think comms is one of the biggest weaknesses. We mentioned kind of how TA can elevate our visibility. Have a comms strategy. Have a standardized newsletter you're going to send out every single month. All the updates on what's going on with the market, what's going on with layoffs, what's going on with competitor skill sets, etc. get that regular cadence just into people's inbox so that when they do have that bigger problem, they think of you because they've seen these regular drip feeds of information that is interesting to them. But start small, start simple.
And I, and I think start small, start simple, sound advice. I think some of the pits that you touched on there, though, go and speak to your people analytics team, go and speak to your SWP team. Like lots of orgs won't have this within them. I think my kind of counter to that would be, go and speak to your vendor partners or toy with some that you might want to work with, and I'm sure they'll share plenty of data with you to help support it. I think on that same theme, though, of maybe not having the access, like if you're a team that doesn't have the resource and doesn't have the budget, maybe your ATS isn't optimized in a way that you can get the data. Like what's a low effort, high output activity that you've seen work for, a more nimble team, let's say, or a leaner team?
The easiest is byproduct, as I mentioned earlier. So anything you can do that's byproduct of your normal process. So interview feedback is huge. Capturing what's going on with your candidates on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be a big programmatic thing across all of TA. As a recruiter, if you're just an individual contributor sitting here thinking, all right, I want to get a bit better at this, if you don't have LinkedIn Talent Insights or LinkedIn Recruiter, or you don't have big ATS or CRM systems you can tap into, just think about who you're talking to every day. Make notes. Like, obviously, keep personally identifiable information out of it. You don't want to get done for GDPR and all that. If you've got a recurrent theme of candidates turning me down due to location or compensation, make notes on this. And then you can look at it and go, all right, well, I can see out of the last 100 people I've spoken to, you could have a drop-down box. What's the overall theme? Is it compensation? Is it location? Is it skills? Is it what employer brand or whatever? Have a drop-down, quick count of each one. Go, all right, I can see the last 100 people I've spoken to from this job code in this location have all turned us down for these reasons. This seems like it's a recurrent issue. Who do I need to talk to get this fixed? Do I need to talk to our hiring manager? Do I need to talk to HR, recruitment marketing? And it's just diving into those conversations and starting to have those conversations in a different way. And you will be challenged. You'll get that pushback of saying, all right, that's great. Give us more information, give us more data, give us more insights. And that's where the kind of the cycle starts and the mechanism starts going. You start going, well, actually, to do that, I need more resources, or I need new capabilities, or I need new access to new tooling. Is it worth it for you as a business? If we do this, we can do this across all of our business lanes or all of our geographies. Is it worth it for you to do that? Mm-hmm. And that's where you can start building kind of the credibility for the investment.
Yeah, and I think it's like that, almost like internal demand generation. You mentioned before, like it doesn't need to be a dossier. It can simply be a one-pager that says, here's some interesting stuff. And they're like, wow, that's fascinating. I'd love to know more. And you're like, yeah, so would I. But I've got a resource challenge and I'm not going to be able to. So, give me money, give me a resource, and I can go and do it. Or give me a specialist. And I think that's probably another kind of question and theme I'd love to explore with you, because if we think back of TA teams, lots of people doing 360 roles, then you saw this emergence of many, many, many more specialist roles. And I know there's teams out there with 70, 80 different types of recruitment related roles. We've spoken a lot about, I think that refining the service offering is probably a good framing for the discussion which we've had before and the discussion which we kind of had today around TA's value and TA's place. Do you think it need, like, on the concept and the basis that it needs to change, do you think we're able to do that with the same people? Do you think people need to adopt different skills? Like, what do you see a TA team of the future looking like? How do you see the balance?
Yeah, great question. There's a huge chunk that will be able to remain in terms of the advisory piece. So advising a business on the day-to-day activities and being a more consultative partner for a hiring manager, 100%. Like that's stuff we should be doing that we've probably kind of beaten out of ourselves a little bit as an industry. But that's something we can definitely scale up in those areas. Absolutely, I think we should bring in specialist skills. And I think historically we haven't been very good at that within TA. If you think about going backwards, most TI teams have been stood up by people that were recruiters, myself included.
Yeah.
You look at it now and think, well, actually, it probably is a specialist skill set, the same as people analytics and talent acquisition analytics. We've quite often said, oh, well, we don't have anyone from people analytics doing this. We'll stand it up and put a recruiter into talent acquisition analytics. It's a whole specialist function. Recruitment marketing, the same. We had recruiters that started doing recruitment marketing and say, well, actually, we write adverts. So, we're marketeers and we write copy, so we'll do that as well. And we have these kind of multi-skilled individuals within TA that can pick up lots of areas. But I do think there is an element of saying, well, actually, we don't need people that can pick up lots of areas. We need some real specialist skill set. That probably flies a little bit in the face of where I think a lot of the skills are going, a lot of industries are going, where it's more around that flexible, fluid skill set where people can pick up and move across different job families much more fluidly. I think both could equally occur. You could end up with some real generalists that have got some really broad skill sets that can move across, or that deep subject matter expertise. I think they're not necessarily mutually exclusive within the industry. I think we're going to see both happening. I think there definitely is value to both. So I think you can try and get the best of both worlds. So we have a fairly specialized talent intelligence team, for example, but then we have rotation programs where any one time we've got maybe a third of our team, maybe up to half of our team, with rotation individuals. And some of them are recruiters, some of them are recruitment coordinators, some of them are program managers, all different backgrounds coming in to look at problems from a different perspective within the talent intel arena. So don't be afraid of that. Like look at bringing in rotation programs or job shadowing, or look at individuals just trying and experimenting in new areas, because I'm yet to have anyone in my team do any kind of skills training or any kind of development and not see an angle where it can come back into TA in some kind of way, shape, or form.
And I think there's definitely parallels as well when we think about technical audiences, and we see this a lot. We see tech recruiters moving into kind of product manager roles and moving into like tech program management roles, because they've got an innate understanding of the org, how it's structured, how those teams interplay. Yep. So like an example of moving out of it, I think the examples that you shared of people moving across, are we taking enough skills externally from the market and giving them the TA domain expertise? And then how can you balance people with TA domain expertise needing to acquire new skills to kind of sit within this new or like a refined service offering? So yeah, it's definitely like a really interesting like probe into it. Last part, and this is not on your direction, this is on my direction, because I think I'm a part of the community. I see a lot of value within it. Tell us, Talent Intelligence Collective, where can people sign up? What's of interest to people? What can they expect to see? Because you've got a ton of information that people might be listening to today, and actually there's so much more when it comes to actually deploying this and leaning on other orgs, leaning on other people is important. So yeah, tell us a bit more.
Yeah, so luckily the community is really giving with their time and expertise. So we've got various different channels. So WhatsApp is probably the biggest channel, but it's obviously quite hard to find the WhatsApp. So if you just do Talent Intelligence Collective, we've got a Facebook group, we've got a Shopify page, which sounds a bit weird, but it was a really easy way of just hosting everything. We've got a newsletter on LinkedIn. If you go on the Shopify page, it's got links to everything. So we've got podcasts, we've got monthly webinars, we've got lots of white papers and benchmarking reports. As I say, the WhatsApp groups are super busy with knowledge sharing, etc. It's all peer-to-peer networking. But yeah, if you just throw Talent Intelligence Collective into pretty much any social channel, beyond the really cool stuff with the cool kids that I'm not into, but any of your traditional boring social channels, I'll be there. Or just put it into Google. Talent Intelligence Collective.shopify.com, and we're there as well.
Nice.
Or just hit me up on LinkedIn.
Yeah, awesome, dude. And I think, for people watching, listening, I can speak to it personally, but I think as a movement, this is certainly one of the big directions where we need to go as an industry, and be able to replay things back using numbers, using data, using qualitative insight to say this is what people are saying about us. This is how we act as an organization. These are the options that you've got for hiring, or just practically in your day to day, being able to challenge the business back and not just be an order taker, and help justify your position in the organization as well. So I think all of these things roll back into talent intelligence. So super important. Dude, it's been awesome having you on. Thanks for joining, and we could have gone for another day. I was about to start skills-based hiring them, but I thought there's no way we'll edit that out, and I know we can go back to that, so maybe another time. But yeah, dude, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I'd love it. Whenever you want me back, just give me a shout. Thank you so much for having me.
Always, man. See you soon.